Hey Storm Nation fans, Alex Hoskins here with you, and today we're going to start looking at a very important aspect for the bowler and how they make decisions on the lanes. That's going to be arsenal building. I'm going to show you some tips and tricks on how to build an arsenal for something like a house condition and something like the USBC Open Championships condition, where we're going to be making some different decisions based on that environment that we're in. So let's look at some different arsenals for those two situations that you'll find yourself in for a few different styles, and we'll get started. All right guys, the easiest way I feel like to look at all the different balls in the line and where they fit into slots in your arsenal is looking at the RGs, the diffs, the cover strengths, and the surface. Okay, so some combination of that is going to put it in a certain spot in your bag, and we're going to start at the very top. So that's going to be a very strong asymmetric ball with quite a bit of surface. So an Ion Max would be a good example of that. When we go down to slot 2, that's still going to be an asymmetric ball, but it's probably going to have a little bit less surface. Maybe a shinier ball or even a lane shine ball, a hybrid or a pearl, still asymmetric though. And then as we go down to slot 3, we're going to get back into the surface, but now we've moved into symmetrical bowling balls. Again, still some surface, low RG, strong, fast spinning cores, but that's going to be kind of our benchmark category, and we'll talk about that in a minute. As we go down to slot number 4, we're still going to be in that symmetrical category, but again, we're using less surface and weaker covers. So that just lets that ball get further and further down the lane. It allows us to stay straighter longer. As we go down to slot 5, we move to higher RG parts, still symmetrical, but with some surface. This could be urethane, this can be some low-end high RG parts with surface. And then when we get down to our very last ball in slot 6, that's going to be our high RG shiny balls. Think balls like Typhoon or Ultimate Wrecker that are going to really get down the lane and change direction very hard off the end of the pattern. So what I'm going to do is bowl on a house shot here first, and I've actually chosen Equinox as my first ball. So I'm going to throw that, and then we'll explain why I feel like that's a good matchup for my particular style on the house shot. Be wondering why I've chosen Equinox for my particular style. And yeah, my rev rate is fairly high. It's not really high, but my speed is very slow. Now because of that, my ball tends to hook quite a bit overall. I'm definitely on the rev dominant side. So you're going to notice in those categories of bowling balls that I labeled off, I didn't have the strongest sanded ball in my arsenal today for the house shot. The big reason for that is that would force me a little bit too far left. And we know when you start getting left on those high ratio patterns, long left can come into play, and that cliff gets kind of over exaggerated a little bit. So I feel like Equinox could help me stay a little bit straighter. Now, if you're more speed dominant, you may want to move up to something like an Origin or even like an Ion Max because you have more of that speed and you're looking for that ball to dig into the lane a little bit more. If you're more on the rev dominant side, you could even go down to something like an Attention Star that's going to be even cleaner through the front of the lane and allow you to stay on that friction even longer. So now as we transition into the next spot in the bag, I'm going to go with Rockstar, and we'll look at what that looks like on the lane here. All right guys, we just threw a shot with Rockstar here, and what you probably saw there is that was a very smooth but continuous kind of shape. Really, this is the benchmark spot in our bag. It's somewhere in the middle of the line. There's asym balls that are bigger, and there's higher RG, kind of shinier balls that shape more down lane. So Rockstar is a really good option for me in that spot because it still allows me to play a couple of different angles on the lane. Now again, if I had maybe a little bit more ball speed, I might go up to something like a phase 2 that digs into the lane a little bit more. If I had a little bit less speed, maybe an IQ Tour that's kind of going to push through it a little bit more with the cleaner cover. So overall, Rockstar gave me kind of the best option there. And then looking further at my arsenal here, I actually would have kind of another ball in this category just because of my style and the environment, the house shot that we're bowling on right now, and that would be Ion Pro. Now Ion Pro is a little different. It is an Asym, but it has a lot less diff, which makes it a little bit smoother overall, which I like when my ball hooks quite a bit down lane. With my slower speed, I'm always looking for something that's gonna blend out that back part of the pattern, and I feel like Ion Pro does that perfectly on the house shot and allows me to stay close enough to the friction that I don't feel like I feel that ratio or that long left when I'm projecting the ball down the lane. Now, if you're more on the speed dominant side, keep in mind that just because there's 6 categories doesn't necessarily mean you need 1 ball in each category. You can just see right here that I've actually got 2 balls kind of in that slot 3 category of balls, those benchmark type bowling balls. Now, if you're more speed dominant, you may have 2 stronger balls, stronger Asyms with surface to really help you blend out that little bit of time that your ball has on the lane with all your speed. And if your rev rate's really low, it's going to be amplified even more. So that would be something, again, like Ion Max, possibly Origin EX, Attention Star S2, those bigger balls with surface to help that ball slow down a little bit more. And you may have more than one of them in your bag for that spot because that's a point on the lane and in that environment that you're more prone to using those balls for a longer period of time. You don't want to have balls in your arsenal that you're only using for a very short window. Your style is naturally going to dictate whether you're towards the stronger or the weaker side or somewhere in the middle. All right, guys, now we're going to go even further down the list in the arsenal. Now, as we go further and further down, keep in mind that we're talking about front to back hook here. Okay, those balls at the very top of your arsenal, the strong asymmetrics, those are the earliest front to back. Remember, the lane is 17.5 times longer than it is wide, so there's a whole lot more real estate front to back for your ball to do something than there is left to right. Good bowlers read the lane front to back. So as we keep going down, we're getting our hook further and further down the lane, which is going to be maybe game 2, maybe in the middle of game 2, or even as we transition into game 3. Now, a good option for me in that scenario would be an IQ Tour AI. Again, smoother, less total diff, cleaner cover, shiny, so I can bump up next to the friction on this house shot and not feel like I have that long left in play. But if you were a little bit more speed dominant, you could go up to something maybe like a Phase AI or even a Zen 25 that has more overall diff and is going to blend that out front to back because your ball's on the lane a little bit shorter amount of time. As we move further and further down, we're going to go down to a ball that's very clean, generally higher RG, clean cover, usually a little bit shinier surface, and for me that's going to be a Typhoon. And this is something that I know is going to get through any traffic in the front of the lanes. We're talking game 3, later in the day once there's a lot of lines from all the other players down the lane. If I want to stay straighter, I know that that Typhoon's going to get through the front of the lane cleaner and still have enough energy to go through the pins. And if they do get fanned open a little bit more, then I can move left, throw it at that hook, and know that it's going to come off of it significantly harder than any of the other balls will that will be much earlier and smoother in my arsenal. Now again, if you throw it a little faster, you may go up to something like a Road Warrior that has a little bit more total diff just to blend out the pattern a little bit more. But for my style on this pattern, I ended up choosing Typhoon because I feel like that's the best fit for my style. And then as we go to the last ball in the bag, this is where it can be a little bit tricky because you have a few different options. We haven't talked about spare balls or urethane yet. Some people like to double having urethane as their spare ball. If you have that as an option, urethane pitch black could be an option here. For me, with my speed being a little bit slower, I actually like level in this spot. It keeps shaping a little bit more for me than urethane, and it's not quite as early as urethane, so I don't feel like it forces me to the left quite as fast, which is very helpful, especially like we said, when there's high amounts of ratio on the lane because that brings long left into play. So a level is what I'm choosing on the house shot here right now because I can bump up next to it. Again, I'm probably going to use this earlier in the day. So just because we're talking about this last, don't think that it's the last ball to come out of the bag. It's just where it would fit in with what you currently have. So again, if you use a spare ball, you may throw a spare ball here and you may have to take another ball out of the bag in order to put something if you need it in this category in that spot. All right, so we just oiled with a medium length, higher volume pattern, sport compliant, which represents something that we feel like you'll see in team event out there, okay? So when we start in team event, we know at nationals there's a lot more volume. So my arsenal is gonna change a lot. If you remember, I had Equinox at the top for the house shot, but now I'm actually gonna step up to an Ion Max for the Open Championships because of that extra volume. I really need my ball, even with my slower speed, to slow down in that front part of the lane because there's just more volume of oil on the lane. And I don't want my ball getting down to the end of the pattern and being very erratic, especially when that ratio is a little bit flatter. So I think Ion Max is a very good option for me. I may use a lot of surface, I may not use as much surface. Since my speed's a little slower, I could use a little bit less than somebody that maybe throws it a little bit faster. But I still think Ion Max is gonna be the best spot. I'll throw a couple of shots here, and then we'll kind of go down the line with some different balls that I think could be good in this spot. Okay, so you can see that Ion Max gives me that really early front to back motion. It really makes me feel like I'm in control of the end of the pattern, which is really what I'm looking for in team. But there are times that that might be a little bit too strong overall, maybe for the fresh or for your style or whatever situation that you find yourself in. So I do have another option here. It's been a really good benchmark ball for a long time, and that is IQ Tour. A little bit cleaner cover, so maybe this does let me use a little bit more surface and not feel like it gets offline as much. And it also, more importantly, allows me to play to the right a little bit more, which is very important for finding where that friction is on the lane. As you can imagine, the more left we move, we're moving into the flattest part of the oil pattern, and it's really hard for our ball to see the lane the right way when we feel like we're bowling on a one-to-one pattern with a lot of volume. So I'm gonna ball down to IQ Tour right here. You'll see I'm actually able to get a little bit more to the right, and let's see if we can still get the ball through the front of the lane clean enough and feel like we have some control off the end of the pattern. All right guys, so you can see that IQ Tour allowed me to kind of shut my angles down a little bit more, which is good because it's filling a different spot in the bag. The worst thing that you can do is have 3, 4, 5 balls that do kind of the same thing, because then when one's not working, they're all kind of in that wrong spot or making the wrong shape. So I really like how that complemented my first ball there. And this is a good time to remind you that just because these two matched up for me doesn't mean that you couldn't maybe ball up to an RST hyperdrive on that first slot in your bag. You could also use maybe an Origin and put some surface on it if you need to. There's a lot of different adjustments and tweaks that you can make to fit these balls into your game for the environment that you're bowling on. So keep in mind, surface is very important and the ball choice itself is very important too. So you can see how IQ Tour definitely let me play a different part of the lane. Now I don't have another ball here, but if I was to go a little bit further down, maybe game 2, game 3, we know a lot of teams use a lot of surface in that team event. I may need a little bit shinier, higher RG ball that's gonna let it float through the front of the lane more. And for me, that's gonna be a Road Warrior. I feel like that ball's very clean through the front of the lane. It's gonna change direction quite a bit off the end of the pattern, so it's definitely gonna be a game 2, game 3 kind of ball once some oil has gotten pushed down the lane, so I don't feel like it's too sideways as it comes off the end of the pattern. But if you did have maybe again more speed, you may not get down to Road Warrior, and that's okay. You may use something like a Phase AI or a Zen 25 that has that lower RG to kind of help you in that spot. Again, it's dependent on your style and what you're bowling on at that time. So don't feel locked in to one ball per category. Each different category can be based on what ball fits up to your style and what you're bowling on. So what we're going to do next is oil with a little bit different pattern that we feel like represents the doubles and singles pattern. And we're going to go over a few more balls that I would bring to the USBC Open Championships to be able to have a good look from a couple of different angles on the lane for my particular style. And we'll go over some other styles, what balls might benefit as well. We just oiled with a little bit longer pattern. Historically, doubles and singles has been a little bit on the longer side, and this year it felt no different. There was definitely more volume, maybe a little bit more length too, but you had to play a little bit straighter. So the first ball that we're actually gonna look at here, and this kind of gets back into that spot of whether you have urethane or plastic or maybe kind of a lower end reactive type ball that has surface on it still. But for me, I felt like pitch black was the best option in this spot. I can play really straight. There was plenty of volume on the lane, so I was able to use quite a bit of surface to slow down the pitch black plenty through the front of the lane and feel like I had a good amount of hook off the gutter while kind of keeping my angles very straight. It may be a little bit quicker off the gutter with some stronger balls. We'll get to that in a minute, but I'm going to throw pitch black a few shots here, get really up close to the gutter, and you'll see how kind of smooth and predictable that this looks for me here. So you can see with pitch black, I'm able to stay very close to the gutter, which is what I want, especially in this doubles and singles pattern, because it feels like there's plenty of friction out by the gutter, but it's a little bit tighter down lane. So I'm able to keep my angles very closed and keep everything in front of me, which I think is going to be a benefit. But again, remember, I'm a little bit on the rev dominant side. I can get urethane to pick up off of that. Maybe if your rev rate's a little bit lower in your speed could be higher or it could be lower. But if your rev rate's not there, that urethane might not be able to kind of shape off of it as much. You may have to go up to something like an Ion Max or a big, strong asymmetrical ball. It sounds like those are so far apart, but if you think about what they actually do on the lane, it's very similar. They're very early. They're balls for the fresh that you're trying to get to bleed out that middle part of the lane. So feel like Ion Max, RST Hyperdrive, Attention Star S2. Those are balls with surface, stronger balls that are really going to dig into that front part of the lane and be good on the fresh. Now obviously, as more and more shots go down the lane, the front of the lane is going to start blowing up and I'm going to have to move off of that spot. This is where historically urethane doesn't look very good throwing the ball from left to right. As you open those angles up, it just doesn't quite do the right thing. So I have another option here, which is Ion Pro. Again, if you remember, this is a sanded, asymmetrical ball, lower RG, but not a lot of diff. So this is still in that smooth category, you can see, but now I'm able to open my angles up a little bit more, throw it a little bit more at it, and watch it come off a little bit harder. Okay, so I'm gonna throw that a couple of shots here, and you'll see kind of a different shape than you did out of pitch black. And like I said, that's key to building a good arsenal, is making sure that you have balls that do different things in different scenarios that really match up to what your style gives the lane in that particular environment at that time. So we'll throw Ion Pro here and see what differences we see on the lane. So you can see how much more shape that Ion Pro gives me. I feel much more confident in throwing it from left to right and knowing that it's going to come off of it, where pitch black was a great option on the fresh, but as it kind of started to burn up and the front of the lane started hooking, we know urethane hooks very early, so Ion Pro gave me a much better overall shape, being able to shape it from left to right a little bit more. But then we move into another ball, phase 2, which is going to be a strong symmetrical ball. Since we lose some of that asymmetry and we increase that diff, we're gonna see more change in direction out of that. So again, as the lane kind of breaks down more and more, we're gonna feel more confident that we can continue to move left with that, and we can throw it into our lines that hopefully our team has built up to the right there, and actually feel like we're gonna get a very defined change in direction off the end of the pattern because there's more diff, there's more engine in that bowling ball, and we still have quite a bit of surface. And you can see why these Phase 2s, IQ Tours, those balls have been in the line for so long because they match up so well to a lot of different styles and a lot of different patterns. They're right in the middle of the line, so the lane almost always comes to them at some point, and you're gonna have a good look no matter what your style is with those particular balls. All right guys, that wraps up our arsenal building video, which kind of gives you an idea of just one way to build an arsenal. Now, a few things I want you to remember. Keep in mind that you don't need this to look perfect on paper. I know we talked about the different slots for the bowling balls. It's not like you have to have one particular kind of bowling ball in each different slot, okay? This is a dynamic arsenal building idea. It's gonna depend on what you're bowling on and what your style is. So if you're a little more on that speed dominant side, you're probably gonna have more stronger balls in all those different categories, as opposed to if you're like me and what you saw today, a little bit more rev dominant, you may be a little bit more the other direction. So whether you're bowling out in league or whether you're bowling the Open Championships, just know we have a lot of different balls in the line that are available to strike from different angles on the lane. And that's the whole point of us creating these bowling balls in R&D, is trying to give you the best option to strike no matter what circumstance that you end up in. So build your arsenal a little bit more effectively out there, have fun, and bowl up a storm.